Hello to all of our dear friends. We do apologize for a slight delay of this broadcast. We're broadcasting from New York. My name is Vlad. This is Leo. We're your instructors for this semester. Great to be with you again. A great honor to be with you yet again. Last Sunday was a great class. We enjoyed ourselves. You know that there was a different instructor. There was Albert. Albert was only filling in for Leo, who actually was absent. He was out of state at that moment. Gladly, Leo is back, and he's going to be our instructor from here on instead of Albert. Wonderful start to the semester. We know that you had a great class on Wednesday, and we listened to that class.
Sunday, I think.
Sunday. That's right. This Wednesday's today, right?
Wednesday's today.
Okay, that's right. Today's the Wednesday class. The Sunday class that you saw with our instructors from Israel, Mutlu and Marcos. A wonderful class, and so many topics have been covered. Right?
Yeah, so many topics. We really covered the purpose of creation. The structure of the system called creation, the concept of creator, the creature,
the conscious development of the creature, how the desire actually came about.
Yes, and how we started from a state of seeming unconsciousness, almost like a baby in a womb, or even less than that,
to a brand new conscious development now, right?
And the five worlds through which we descend, the creator kind of conceals himself in that state of perfection more and more until we find ourselves in this world, right?
Exactly, and how we come about to naturally to the point in the heart, the reason why we're all gathered here at these lectures.
And most importantly, I think, and we will come back to it today, is really the evolution of the desire, which this is a central theme in Kabbalah, because everything is desire. The whole world, really, there's nothing else. That was the only thing that was created.
Yeah, from my memory, we used to do a whole class on just evolution of desires. It was a very complex topic, and we heard your questions at the Sunday broadcast, and it seems like you were able to navigate both that topic and all the other topics that came with it. So we're glad to see that wonderful burning desire of yours, and we feel that this class will go just as smoothly as before.
Right, and today really continues that same trajectory. Exactly. We are going to look at something very interesting. We're going to look at the evolution of the will to receive, the evolution of that desire, and really how it corresponds to the evolution of humanity and the evolution of the wisdom of Kabbalah. We'll see how those things are really interconnected, are inseparable. And the nice thing about it is that this is something that we can all find in ourselves, because we are always changing. Our desires are always evolving. They're changing. We start with one thing and then we go to another thing. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that structure, kind of try to put some order into this seemingly chaotic process.
Seemingly is the key word, because as we've come to learn, studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, also what the sages have been telling us for thousands of years, is that everything has an order, everything is within the structure. And the structure of creation that you've studied in the previous class, as a matter of fact, it's much deeper, much broader than what was described. This was just the beginning. And then the amazing thing is that how all of the systems in our world, as well as of the five worlds above, everything is in perfect sync and is in perfect order, and to the point that when we're speaking about the evolution of desire, that the desires are developing, right? At the same time, we can look at the trajectory of the evolution of the wisdom of Kabbalah, and how it perfectly correlates to the events that unfolded over time.
In fact, we will see, and I don't know if we're ready to show our little drawing board, but we will see that, as you recall, the three states, going from Ein Sof down to our world right here, and then going through the state of this world, and Vlad is going to show me something on the pad.
Yeah, there's
a pointer.
This thing,
beautiful
pointer that you can use.
Right, so because you don't see my pen. So this process of going down and all the way down to our world, which is located here, that's the state where we're in right now, and then the process of going back up to Ein Sof, to the state of adhesion. And what's interesting to note is that as the desire, the human desire develops, as we see, really kind of growing in this hyperbolic line, at the same time, the wisdom of Kabbalah becomes more and more concealed. So you have this very interesting kind of symmetry. As we develop, the wisdom becomes more and more concealed, but for a reason, right?
Of course, and we'll get to that naturally. And also something to note is that again we're talking about the same three lines here. That we in the previous class we spoke about the fact that there's this state called Ein Sof, from which everything was emanated, the creature was created, the brand new desire, as you know, the desire to receive was created. That desire to receive at first was in perfect unison, perfect adhesion with the Maker. And at some point, that desire needs to take upon itself a certain independence, right? Naturally, in order to come to a conscious adhesion with the Creator. So the Creator pretty much gives it a certain amount of weight in order to distance it from it. So this downward line that you see here shows the descent of that creature, of that desire to the level of our world. Right? So at this point right here, we're talking about the fact that the creature is completely distanced, completely opposite to that of the Creator. And from here on, from this point on, we're starting our ascent. We're moving in this trajectory of our world in order to reach the times when we are ready and able to finally return to our Maker. And more on this, of course, because there's a vast process that takes place in the evolution of the very basic desire all the way to the desire of the speaking level, as you learned in the last class.
And I wonder if Alex is ready with the clip. He will let us know. We have a very nice clip that just sums up just the last 14 billion years or so. It'll be interesting to watch it. So Alex, just let us know as soon as the clip is ready. But
let's go over the a couple of things for the class.
Sure.
Naturally, friends, we always expect your questions. This goes without saying. We're going to do our best to allot the times all throughout the lesson in order to, kind of gaps in between the subtopics in order to take your questions. Throw your questions at us, challenge us as much as you can. This topic is fairly straightforward, and at the same time there's a lot of minor micro scrutiny that needs to go into it in order to really grasp it. So we welcome all of your questions. Naturally, hopefully, they're going to be on topic. We have a ton of students with us today, and last time we only read the locations. Today, we are glad to read to you the actual names because we already know a lot of you. You submitted a lot of fantastic questions. Albert and I in the previous class were just taken aback by the sheer power of the questions that the students were asking. And friends, the interesting thing is that every single semester we are in complete awe to what an extent the questions become deeper and deeper, and how ready the students come to the class. And this leap that happened between the last semester and this one, it's incomparable. Honestly, it's something beyond recognition.
And maybe today, after today's lesson, we'll also understand why is that happening. I mean, again, Kabbalah explains everything that happens around us, and this is actually one of those things. But I think the clip is ready, so we'll take a couple of moments to watch an interesting clip that just kind of sums up everything that happened in the last few billion years or so. And as we watch it, let's try to just when you watch a clip, try to kind of look inside of yourself and see if you can detect any similarities to your own personal development or even to the development of your own desires as you watch the clip that is showing the development of kind of our universe. So it's an interesting scrutiny. Really take a moment, put your pens down, and just watch the clip and try to
absorb it.
Totally. So, Alex, let's play the clip.
it's like my whole life just flashed in front of my eyes. It reminds me of a scene from Fifth Element. You know,
it's true. You look at this clip, and we're looking at kind of processes that took place over the past 14 billion years, seemingly without our involvement. But when you look inside of you, it really makes you kind of recall those times in your life when you were really just like a rock, just lying there, receiving the nutrients and everything, your desires, very simple, very rudimentary, just survival, just maintaining myself, right? And then those desires start to grow, and you get into they become more diverse, from the world of rocks and minerals. Suddenly we have this leap in the evolution into vegetative. Wow, the richness of the vegetative degree, and suddenly it's like a baby that suddenly like steps outside of his house, or at least sticks his head out the window. Suddenly there's like a world out there, right? It's an amazing thing. And then later followed by the animate degree, where you already have some freedom. You can disengage from your your home, your crib, and you start to have all those other desires grow in you. And the same way the world went through all these upheavals and discoveries, right? Discovering America, discovering the Far East, and we the same way. I discover what lies at the end of my neighborhood, and then another city, and then you move to another country sometimes. And so it's really interesting how really parallel those processes are.
Yeah,
right?
If we compare it to the development of our desire, and we forget about the fact that yes, I was born to a certain family, to a certain upbringing, and my life just started a certain number of decades ago. But rather look deep inside and realize that the desire is much older than what we think it really is, and looking at it from the perspective of humanity as a whole. Reveals a certain pattern here that we are, on the one hand, the desire to receive develops much more and more and more rapidly, and on the other hand, attempts to push us to the brink of
to something.
Yeah, to the brink of something, I guess, right?
So that's very true. I mean, even in the last lesson, we talked about how the desire kind of pushes us to desire more, to desire something else, something beyond those things. So, again, it's interesting, and we encourage everyone here to really do the scrutiny, really kind of look at, not now during the lesson, but right after the lesson, just take some time and contemplate your life, contemplate what you went through, how your desires kind of, arose inside of you, and what they kind of make us do and pursue right in our lives, and go to places and meet people and do things, and all the while something is churning inside. There's these wheels are turning, right? And every once in a while there's this leap, right? There's a little moment where you realize, oh, that's what this thing was all about. So nature works in this way. In fact, also human systems work in this way. If you look at an analog clock, if some of you remember that, that device, the same. Open it up, it's the same thing. You have a lot of small wheels, making a lot of little turns, only to ultimately reach a point where the big wheel just makes one click, and suddenly, a new minute is passed, a new hour, something big happens.
A whole series, a whole long sequence of events in order to produce that one little click, and that one little click in the end is the awakening of the point in the heart. It seems like everything has the whole history, everything you zoom into that, into that one specific moment when you ask yourself that question, what is the meaning of my life? Truly, deeply inside, you ask yourself that question, and out of nowhere you feel like nothing in the world can ever fulfill you. It's like the taste is gone.
The taste is gone, and which is why we end up asking the question, why, what is this all about? Why are we here? And it's that question which drives that, it's that lack, that desire which drives that search, unconsciously at first, maybe then consciously, and then it brings you to a book or a person or a website, and you suddenly find yourself in the middle of the easy fundamentals lesson.
All of a sudden, yes.
So we're going to look at the kind of we're going to look at some of the key, you could say, call them characters that have played a role in the development of this wisdom, And we're going to look at it in parallel to the kind of the unfolding of human history as we know it. I'm sure later, down the line, there's a very interesting course about perception of reality, I'm sure, which will confuse us even more, but then, reveal something else. But for now, let's just call it what it is, that, the way we used to call it, which is history, right?
Exactly. And if we look at history in the most basic linear form, we know, and you've heard a lot of it from education, from school, and from college, and also partially in the class that you had on Sunday with Mutlu and Marcos. The fact that billions of years have passed before the first man, and the man as we know it, right? Not a Neanderthal, but rather Homo sapiens, has finally emerged, right? And we're talking about not comparatively not that long ago, right?
No.
But throughout this history of development of man, the development of Homo sapiens, what did the Homo sapiens actually need? They needed very, very basic things.
Very basic things. I mean, it was pretty much a state of survival, you could say. You could, as we mentioned in the last lesson, it was sort of a state of the still, degree of the desires. I mean, all that man was concerned about was preserving his existence, right? Just in very kind of crude comparative terms, like a rock is interested in preserving its shape and no more. Meaning you just do the necessary actions to preserve your existence. You wake up, you hunt, you look for shelter, you procreate. Just everything you need in order to sustain yourself.
In a very basic way, of course. And if we, take a look at the fact that, yes, this is what's happening all over the globe, and zoom in ancient Mesopotamia, right?
Well, a little before Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is already a little late. We're going even a few steps before that. Somewhere in that area. Okay?
General area, yes. Sorry.
Somewhere in that general area, a person was born. His parents named him Adam. Coincidence? Probably not. Were they aware of it? Probably not. But we'll see how everything is really kind of, this system is really, all those processes, everything is really perfectly timed and scripted.
Synchronized.
So they called him Adam, right? Adam Harishon, the first man. Not to be confused with the first man from the biblical story.
Of course.
This person lived
5,775 years.
Right.
76 years.
75 still.
75,
yes,
okay.
I'm writing that. I hope you can all see that.
5,775 years ago, it's not the birth time of Adam, but rather the time at which the first person, the first human being, the first Homo sapiens, if you will, for the first time has questioned his own existence, and through personal scrutiny and personal search has revealed a certain something.
Okay.
A certain something that did not exist before.
And I want to really stop this, because imagine the gravity of that moment. Everybody lives like animals, right? They just go about their, hunting, foraging, doing the thing, not really caring about anything beyond that survival. And suddenly, try to put yourself in that, situation, in that, inside this person, right? You wake up one morning and suddenly you ask about the meaning of your life. I mean, this is something huge. This is,
it's groundbreaking.
Yeah, it's like suddenly the iPod shows up on the scene. I mean, no, it's on that level of a fundamental change.
It's a huge leap that literally comes out of nowhere. We're talking about the days of the very, very simple folk with very simple desires. Out of nowhere, one person out of millions, however many lived at that time, has this burning question: does the inner search within himself, through a series of events, whatever they may have been, he reveals a certain something. He reveals a certain new dimension to the world that he lives in.
Exactly, and that's very important, by the way, because no one, was there to tell him what it was, to give him a book, to, send him to a website.
There were no EC classes
There
back
were
then,
no,
right?
unfortunately, no EC classes. We're talking about a process of revelation, of discovery that a person goes through, just like any scientist or any person here who has curiosity, who sat and tried to figure out a problem, and suddenly, something clicks and you get it. And in a very similar way, this person, this Adam, was suddenly kind of not only struck with a question, but after some time and some scrutiny and certain work, he finally realizes, he feels it, he understands it, he gets it. He gets how the system works. And he writes a book about it, which is called Raziel HaMalach.
Which means the concealed angel, really?
Right. I mean, there's a lot of meaning. It's in Hebrew. It's nice. I mean, an angel, by the way, is a force, to remind everyone. I don't know if we touched on this before.
I don't think it was covered before, but generally, for now, we'll go much more in depth into the etymology of the word and what it actually means. But generally, for now, let's keep this definition in mind, that angel, whenever it is mentioned in the Kabbalistic books, means force.
Yeah,
certain force of the Creator that helps guide the creature to its predetermined point.
In fact, anything around you, any force, in ancient times, you would have called it an angel. The angel of electricity, the angel of gravity, or the angel that pulls you down, the angel that moves things. It's basically, that's how Kabbalah refers to every force in nature is an angel. So in
the book that Adam writes, Raziel HaMalach, what does he do? He simply describes his own experiences. He describes what he sees, what he perceives, what he senses. Nothing more than that. This is not a methodology yet. This is not the wisdom of Kabbalah as we know it. Rather, this is just for you friends to know that this was the very first human being to come in contact with the upper reality.
Let's see what Baal Sulam writes in the Kabbalah for the Student. By the way, that's this book which you should have by now, right?
I'm pretty sure most already have it.
Right.
I think the Sunday class already covered it
right.
as well.
So in the book, on page 48, you can also read with us in the article titled "The Teaching of Kabbalah and Its Essence." He writes, Adam HaRishon was the first to receive a sequence of sufficient knowledge by which to understand and to successfully maximize everything he saw and attained with his eyes.
Adam HaRishon was the first to receive a sequence of sufficient knowledge by which to understand and to successfully maximize everything he saw and attained with his eyes. The word "with his eyes" is probably something that might bother the students right now. But if we think about the point of view from which Baal Salam was writing, and seeing, the concept of seeing and the concept of eyes and the vision in general is something that is much more beyond the corporeal sight, the corporeal striking of the light with the retina of the eye, right?
To put it simply, basically this person was able to make sense of everything he saw, felt, perceived. Again, we don't need to...
A certain sense of clarity and oneness that he all of a sudden, stumbled
right.
upon.
And he wrote a book about it. That was the beginning, the budding, moments of the method of Kabbalah. It was not a method yet. It was not really, if you can read this book, by the way.
It's still available.
It's in our library, actually. But it wouldn't make too much sense. And the reason is that, and this is what we will see today also, is that the method develops to suit the ego, the desire, the growing desire. We heard that word before. It suits the desire of that time. So it's not that something is changing about the laws of nature. Those laws are absolute, predetermined, as Baal Sulam writes, as Kabbalists tell us. But because the desire is changing, is developing, the ego is constantly growing, the method by which we are able to work with it, overcome it, to reach adhesion with the Creator, that method changes as well. And that's the meaning of the change in the method. It's not that it's suddenly a different method. Rather, it becomes like the resolution grows. It's like you zoom in, right?
It adapts to the times, so to speak.
Right. So let's maybe talk about another interesting character.
Very interesting character, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
4,000 years ago.
4,000 years ago, his name was Abraham. I hope you can read this. I'm not sure you can.
I can't read it from here.
Okay,
it says Abraham, friends. If you're reading it.
I'll try again. I'll do it. You know what? I'll do it like this, so it's easier.
I don't think it's better.
Okay. Imagine this is Abraham. Okay, so let's again picture this situation.
We're talking about ancient Babylon now?
We're talking about ancient Babylon. So picture this situation. It's ancient Babylon, about 4,000 years ago, thriving metropolitan, 3 million people roughly living. Everybody knows each other very well. Everyone is somehow related to one another. You have a lot of cousins and great cousins and a lot of families intermingled. Basically, it's like one massive family. People are trading, doing crafts, agriculture. It's really everything you could expect for in a modern city without the iPad maybe and cars. But besides that, it's everything. I mean, this was the height of development in the ancient times. And everybody's getting along beautifully. Everybody's helping each other, caring for each other. Life is flowing really nicely. Until one moment, suddenly, an eruption of this ego, meaning the little wheel, finished turning enough times, and suddenly the big wheel makes another leap, right? And we find ourselves suddenly with this a greater ego, which suddenly wants to exploit each other, and take from others and enjoy at the expense of others. Suddenly these things that normally don't exist in a family suddenly begin to manifest, right?
Exactly. A spike in the ego, a spike in the self-love, a certain increase in the interest of your own self. So if we're looking at ancient Babylon and consider the fact that people, more or less to a certain degree, on a very basic level, but they still lived as a community. And then out of nowhere, there's this sensation of separation, of attrition between people. And amongst this moment that in the biblical writings is described as the what do you call it?
The Tower of Babel.
The Tower of Babel, where people started, of course, metaphorically started building this tower to get to know God. Right, which is a metaphor for the fact that they've been all of a sudden started exploring, the nature and the stars and the correlation between things and think of an olden age, new age. Right?
In a way,
something like that.
Yeah, in a way, the tower symbolizes really this uncontrolled growth of the desire. Suddenly, something, a civilization that pretty much lives on the ground floor, you can imagine, suddenly has this higher aspirations.
And people out of nowhere start speaking different languages. And what does it really mean that they start speaking different languages?
It means that we stop getting each other. We don't understand what we want. We have clashing desires. Instead of kind of flowing together in the same flow, we suddenly, I want to go this way, you want to go that way. It's really a great deal of confusion, uncertainty. You can imagine, suddenly, like your family feels like strangers.
And amongst, within and amongst this maelstrom of ego, emerges a man who actually happens to be one of the priests, one of the gazillion priests that existed back then, who were what? They were
idol worshippers.
Idol worshippers, right?
Yes. Well, again, just to put it in perspective, and by the way, if you're interested, Maimonides writes a great deal about Abraham and that period, and there's a lot of other accounts. But just to be clear, we're talking about people who are very, very advanced, people who were observing nature for many, many hours of the day, for many years. It's not like us. We go out the door, oh, the stars are out. Maybe we see the moon, full moon, because everybody talks about it. But this is someone who spent a great deal of his life watching, observing nature, serving as a advisor to the king, person who's very learned about really anything that existed around him, anatomy and nature and botany and zoology. He was a local scientist. And he also tended to that desire that people had to worship different idols, different forces.
So just like with Adam, Abraham stumbles upon a certain burning question. It's becoming a bit of a recurring theme here. Stumbles upon a question about the meaning of life. He starts researching, trying to find the source of all of the different forces that he is able to perceive. And
particularly in the context of this growing, erupting ego, which threatened the peace and the life in Babylon at the time. And what he sees is that basically nature presents us with these two options, two paths. One path, which was espoused by the king at the time, King Nimrod, his name was. He said, basically, let's just go our separate ways, right? We don't get along. We just move out. As a big planet, we can just go elsewhere. And indeed, most of the people chose that path. And people basically left Babylon to start different communities. And that's the root for the many nations that we see around the planet today. But Abraham saw a different picture of nature. He actually, when he observed nature closely, as do scientists today, for example, you see that nature is built on connection. Everything is motivated by different connections, from the atomic level all the way to a social level between us. Everything is determined by the nature of the connection between the pieces, basically. The connection dictates everything. Is this a good environment? Is it a bad environment? Is it nurturing? Is it depleting and weakening? Is it a place that is exciting, or is it a place that's a downer? It all depends on what's happening between people, really between every two elements in nature. If you want to really get down to it.
So Abraham writes a book, right?
Right.
Writes a book called Sefer Yetzirah, which means the book of creation. And this moment marks the very first time that the method of the wisdom of Kabbalah and how to correctly reach that adhesion with the Creator, that revelation of godliness, appears in a written format. This is the very first man, and this is why actually we say that the wisdom of Kabbalah starts not with Adam, who revealed spirituality, but rather with Abraham, who not only revealed it, but very importantly wrote down the method by which he did it. And this is a turning point altogether in the history of the wisdom of Kabbalah, because this is the beginning of an opportunity for human race to try themselves at this thing called attempt to adhere to the Creator, attempt to reveal that upper force.
And as we said, Maimonides, in Hebrew Rambam, he writes about it in a book called The Mighty Hand. And he writes, at 40 years of age, Abraham came to know his Maker. He was calling out, wandering from town to town, from kingdom to kingdom. Finally, tens of thousands assembled around him. And they are the people of the house of Abraham.
Beautiful. So this Abraham naturally gathers people around himself. A lot of people want to know what he has to offer. This method in itself becomes, I guess, in current days we could call it goes viral, right? And how many people gather around him?
Well, records say anywhere from 3,000 and 5,000 to all the way up to 10,000 or 20,000. But let's just put it this way: a small group, large in ancient times, but tiny in comparison to the rest of the population that existed at the time.
Of course, and these people are aspiring to hear what this teacher has to say about this upper force that unites all of the other forces that people in Babylon back then were experiencing.
Right. I'm trying to be more economical here with our real estate because it's so. I'm writing here. Don't confuse this with the count before Common Era, after Common Era. We're talking about 5,775 years ago for Adam and 4,000 years ago for Abraham. It's maybe interesting to know that the time that goes from Adam to Abraham, about 20 generations. There's additional characters in the middle. Just a worthwhile note: every character that we mention, that you see mentioned in the Bible, for example, really represents a state in the development of our desires,
exactly.
and also in our relationship to the Creator. So it's important to, we easily go to Adam. We imagine some guy, in the cave maybe, and Noah with the ark. Again, this guy, and Abraham. But those are really we're talking about internal states. So 20 generations go to Abraham. Another 20 generations.
And that's already 3,000 years ago.
That's about 3,000 years ago. I'm writing. We have another character that springs on the scene. His name is Moses.
So a lot of people heard about this person, naturally, and this was a great Kabbalist who wrote the very fundamental work that as a result and over centuries has become the bestseller, really, right? Once it's been translated and converted and somewhat defiled in some traditions, has become the greatest bestseller of all time. Not a single book comes close to it. Not even 50 Shades of Grey. Can you imagine?
I can imagine. It is true, and again, we're just observing the facts. We're observing what we see around us. We're observing this phenomena of a book that somehow, for no apparent reason, becomes this massive hit around the world with almost every culture, all the big religions, obviously. It's again nothing. When we look at nature, when we stop looking at nature as a collection of random events, and we start to look at it as scenes in a play or in a film where things kind of lead to each other, suddenly things begin to fall into place. We see how this method, which for Adam Rishon was this obscure little book that nobody related to, through Abraham, which is already a much more organized method, talking about the work of attainment in a context of a group, of a larger...
And with Moses, who built something on very stable ground with foundation and pillars and you name it. We were talking about a whole tradition that was built that has sprung up into several major religions as a result. Right?
Yes, it's and we know. I'm just writing this here. We know how easy we can confuse and look at these books as strange texts of history or myths. But when you look at those things as really manuals for inner change, suddenly things stop becoming so strange, and Kabbalists explain to us as we go step by step along the way. They explain what is the meaning of everything. Every little aspect that is mentioned in those books has a meaning which has nothing to do with our corporeal world.
Absolutely.
So
this is very important to note too, and we're going to come back to this point many times over the semester, that there is this gap in understanding, a certain piece of information that's always lost in translation between what we take for granted because it's been written in the book and the reason why it was written and what's the meaning behind what's been written there.
And I just wanted to say, by the way, if you have any questions, please send us your questions. And it is kind of a long sequence, and bear with us. At the end of that sequence, we will take questions about anything and related to the topic. So, again, to explain to everyone, we are talking about the history of humanity, but our focus is not on the historical events that actually took place, rather on those points along the history which correspond to the development of the method of the wisdom of Kabbalah and the desire, right?
And to this point, Mera from Romania is asking, just real quick, I want to cover this. Mera from Romania is asking, is this Abraham the same as the Abraham from the Bible? Yes and no. We're talking about both layers here. On the one hand, we're talking about the Kabbalist that was named Abraham. On the other hand, we're speaking about a certain state that was described in the Bible and was named Abraham. So Abraham, on the one hand, is the Kabbalist. As a matter of fact, the first Kabbalist that there is, who wrote the first method of how to reach spirituality. And on the other hand, Abraham is also a certain state of humanity, a certain state of the creature in the development of the desire to receive, to ultimately reach complete adhesion with the Creator.
And again, this is a tough point to wrap our heads around, and again, we are used to looking at things, especially today in the world, in terms of, okay, what's happening? Who's this character? When did he live? What did he do?
Linear and flat.
Yeah, yes. Linear and flat. But what Kabbalah invites us to do is to kind of add another perspective, another dimension to everything, and start to look less about the characters and more about the relationship. What happens in between? What kind of relationships those characters represent to us between us and the system of nature and ultimately the Creator? This is a much more important point. And in a later lesson, we will touch on the concept of root and branch, and you will see why things appear in the Kabbalistic texts also have some form of representation in the corporeal world. There's a point of contact, as Kabbalists explain to us, but it's very different than what we perceive as history, archaeology. It's very interesting because everything happens inside the desire. I mean, if you want to go really kind of big,
we covered it in the previous lesson
right.
Number 2 as well, that everything is within the desire. Everything happens within there. So when we see that something is written about the fact that, okay, so Moses went and took his people from Egypt into the land of Israel. What is Egypt? What is the land of Israel? What is the people of Israel? What does it mean that he's led them from slavery into freedom? On the one hand, it speaks about the internal desire. On the other hand, there is a certain slight correlation with the physical, historical events that actually took place.
Exactly, but again, our focus and what we want to...
On the internal, naturally.
Exactly, shift the gaze, and especially, well, if some of you may know, the holiday of Passover just took place a couple of weeks back. And the idea that even in that holiday, in the book called Haggadah, which is read in Passover, it says every person has to see himself coming out of Egypt every day, every year, every day. What does it mean? If it happened in the past, if it's a historical event that happened, then it's happened, it's done. But if it's an internal thing, then clearly it points at some process, some cyclical process that is happening inside of us, inside a desire, and certain points in that process that we have to reach.
Absolutely.
So moving on, right? I think we have to move on. So 1,000 years go by. No, actually...
well, approximately 2,000 years ago. We're speaking about the
roughly.
times when the land of Israel was occupied by the Romans. and pretty
It's a
daring
beautiful
times
time.
back then.
Beautiful time, yeah. Imagine, the land is Roman soldiers walking around, and the Jews are somewhat oppressed. The people who lived in Israel at the time were somewhat oppressed. It's already after one temple was destroyed. We're coming to the second temple. During that time, it's a time of upheaval, and one guy really sets out to do something amazing. And he gathers 9 other Kabbalists, and they meet in a cave, just like where we are, to study Kabbalah. And they study what we're studying today, essentially. They study the development of their desire and the development of the ego, and how you can overcome that, by which means we can overcome that and actually reach the purpose of creation. And they gather together and they write that. They write about. It's not like they don't write about the process. They write the process. I mean, the book of Zohar, which they write, the person was named Rashbi, which is short for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's a long Hebrew name with the rabbi at the beginning. In short, we call it Rashbi. And Rashbi and his 9 disciples really do something amazing, right? I mean, even if you compare it to, think of the biggest achievement today that we know of today in technology, in literature, anything. Think of this idea: gather 9 people, sit in a cave, and try to write something for years, mind you, with Romans prowling around you, hunting for you, and try to write something which is equivalent almost to like, 20, 40 volumes of encyclopedia, roughly, just to understand the volume, at the time before iPad and computers. Try to write it together, and that it would represent a spiritual process. I mean, this is...
And the unique thing about this is that these 10 Kabbalists did not just sit together and decide that this is the way we're going to write and this is how this word should be written. No, let's use this word, no, let's cross out this sentence or whatever. We're speaking about the fact that the 10 people combined together into a certain single entity. We're speaking about the fact that these people connected with each other on such a deep personal and spiritual level that they were able to combine their forces, combine their wits, combine their spiritual attainments together to produce something absolutely magnanimous. The most powerful book, and the book by which the wisdom of Kabbalah is actually known.
Yes. I'm sure, I'm convinced that just as I was when I first saw the book of Zohar, compared to what I know about it after studying Kabbalah, there's so much confusion. This is one of the most researched works, literary works in the world. It inspired, provoked so many similar attempts, just in trying to understand what is that thing all about. But what we study, what we see, what you will see as you continue your studies and develop, that this book, like all the other Kabbalistic books, is talking about the inner changes that are happening in our desire, and especially the way we connect, our desires connect. Because again, this is the only thing that exists. If you remember in the last lesson, we mentioned this shattering, this kind of distancing from the Creator, this state of separation where I see myself, I see Vlad next to me, I see 7 billion other people, but this is really only an illusion. It exists only in my perception. But the correction and the process, this path that we're on, is doing only one thing, which is to reveal those connections that exist between us. Really, that this single soul that connects adhesion with the Creator.
The next one question from Francisco from Brazil. He's asking, 10 Kabbalists to write the Zohar. Is there another connected symbolism, 10 Sefirot?
Very good question. Yes, there's actually a lot of those, interconnections and references and symbolism. I mean, Kabbalah is full of that. A lot of the world, most people in the world like to work, deal with that aspect of it, although in and of itself it is worthless for our development. However, as we develop, just as in our body, all the systems in our body are connected, and you'll find the same kind of interconnectedness, interdependence. Every organ plays a role, and it does its role in a unique way while being connected to all the other organs. The same exact kind of relationship existed between the Kabbalists, and it was an expression, a representation of those 10 sefirot, those 10 different attributes, 10 different expressions of the relationship with the Creator.
Yeah, so. Time flies fast, and we have the juiciest stuff still ahead of us.
Oh, really?
Real quick, one more question. Isle from South Carolina is asking, then were we in existence in some shape or form at that specific time? Were we also part of that evolution into spirituality? In other words, was I there together with Moses, with Abraham, with Rashbi? What does it really mean to me? Where am I in that picture?
Well, as I think also in the last lesson there was a question about incarnations, but essentially, the easiest way to look at it is this way: it's a single system. There is no me before or after. It's one system. So it wasn't your consciousness, obviously, that was there. But if you, for lack of a better kind of explanation, your soul is the same soul. Our soul, the collective soul, it's the same soul that keeps kind of developing from generation to generation. It's the same desire, right? There's only one desire that was created, and then that desire was shattered. So our perception was shattered. But it's the same desire undergoing all those changes that we call history, and this event and that event and this book, etc.
So then we move on.
Let's move on.
A lot of time passes still, and we have the most incredible Kabbalists up ahead, actually.
An amazing guy.
The Ari, right?
The Ari is again it's an acronym. It's a short for
Ashkenazi Rabbi Luria.
Exactly, Ashkenazi Rabbi Yitzchak Ari. Here, I'll write it here. No, I won't write it. It's too good.
There's no space.
No space, no real estate. But it's short for the Ari. There's you'll find a lot of those acronyms in among the Kabbalists that lived. It's just easier, faster to go this way. So we'll go with that. So the Ari, again, another beautiful story, and I wish we had more time to really get the students into the kind of the details, but there's a lot of great material that exists, in our library, in our video library also about those times. But it's Israel, it's the 16th century, the city of Tzfat, or Zafed in English, north of Jerusalem, in the Galilee, is a spiritual center, and a lot of people are there studying. The leading figure there, his name is the Ramak, another short, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. He's the leading teacher, the leading Kabbalist at the time, and they study, as their predecessors did over the years. In every generation, there's a small group who studies. And suddenly this character appears out of nowhere. The Ari, he's young, he's charismatic. He spent the earlier years in Egypt, studying the wisdom, attaining his place inside the wisdom, and he appears in Tzfat with a mission to really usher a new age in how we study the wisdom, how we relate to it, right, and what it means for us, right.
And the Ari is such a big figure in the wisdom of Kabbalah, and such a big figure for this particular organization, that to an extent this version of Kabbalah is called Lurianic Kabbalah, because it's based on the teachings of Ashkenazi, Isaac Luria Ashkenazi, right? Otherwise known as the Ari.
Right.
The book, The Tree of Life, is one of the fundamental books, which is actually a commentary on the book of Zohar. Right, and if you actually take a look at the lineage of all the Kabbalists, each of these pillars of the wisdom of Kabbalah writes a book that is some sort of a
A summary, an expression of...
Yeah, and sometimes an expansion, too.
Right.
Of the previous work.
Right.
Of the previous big opus, so to speak.
Because, again, nothing is new. There's nothing new under the sun. Our sage is right. Why? Because all the changes are only inside of us. The system is one. There's one system. Exactly. We learn more and more about ourselves as we develop, as our desire develops. We get to know each other, ourselves, really, by getting to know each other. We see the entire species develops. It's really the same thing. It's that single desire getting to know itself.
So if Abraham writes Sefer Yetzirah, right, the book of creation, and he speaks about a certain something that he feels, as well as a certain method how to attain that what he feels, he's speaking about a certain sensation, right? Later on comes Moses with his 5 books, which is also known as the Bible, right, in the Western world. He speaks about exactly that same sensation, but he adapts it to the modern world, to the world of then, and to the level of egoism, to the level of development that will best suit those times. And the same thing with the Tree of Life here. But the unique thing about the Tree of Life is that the wisdom of Kabbalah stopped being some sort of a, like, just for example, the Zohar is written like a fairy tale. Right? It's not even a fairy tale. It's some sort of phantasmagoria.
Fantasy, yeah.
Really, it's really just a grotesque phantasmagoria. That's how I would describe it. You know, it really sounds nuts when you read it.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, it has absolutely nothing to do with our reality. It's out there, right? Beyond it all is the all-encompassing, all-swaying power of spirituality, the most powerful book there is. What the Ari does is that he takes that book, reads it, and reprograms it to a very specific, precise, scientific language. Right?
And he dictates, basically, the Ari doesn't write himself, he dictates everything to his disciple Chaim Vital. Also a very interesting story, when the Ari passes at age 38, at the ripe age of 38, he passes and he basically forbids all the other students to study. He only allows Chaim Vital to continue to engage in the wisdom, because he's the only one that he sees that he's on the correct path towards attainment. And even Chaim Vital, after writing and expanding more in the wisdom, he takes all the material and all the books and he's buried with them. So just to see how difficult it is. And just one thing to mention, because I think we kind of skipped it as we ran through the ages. If it wasn't clear, the Book of Zohar was written 2,000 years ago and immediately concealed, only to be revealed years later. Absolutely. Years and years and years later.
It's a very important point.
It was written for our time, really. And this is something that cannot be also comprehended. We're used to people writing books and wanting to be bestsellers and move on. This book was written as a manual for our time, and it's amazing. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get into it, but the circumstances under which this book is revealed again. For Rabbi Moshe de Leon walking in a market, some 1,500 years later, and buys fish, right? And he picks up the fish, and the guy wraps the fish in some paper, and he opens the paper, and he sees that it's full of writings, and he looks closer, and it's holy writings, and he realizes this is the Book of Zohar, that up until then there were only rumors, excerpts, nothing. Suddenly he sees this treasure trove, and all the work to put it together, and his widow. Again, we don't have time to get into it, but the script is just beyond our imagination.
Joseph White from Arnold, Missouri says, I tried reading the Zohar and it was almost like reading a calculus textbook. Yeah, to me, it's more like reading Carlos Castaneda in the more extreme moments.
It's important to understand why. Why? Because Kabbalists write to us from their attainment. And remember, their attainment is not like an attainment in this world where you read. But actually, when you study calculus, you can actually slowly understand the book of calculus.
Exactly.
With the Zohar, it's not the same. You have to reach the level from which these people wrote the Zohar in order to actually understand what is written there.
And take some benefit from it, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Exactly. So Kabbalists really just write of the degree in which they are. And this group of Rashbi was in the highest degree. So in a way, you could say that in potential, they reached all 125 degrees, and they wrote from that height to us. That's why the book was not going to make sense in the traditional intellectual way that we're used to perceiving books.
Absolutely. And this brings us to the Kabbalist that actually was able to write for the generation that received his books. And we're speaking about Ba'al Salam, the Kabbalists upon whose specific method our organization is based. Ba'al Salam, also known as by his real name Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag, lived in the early 20th century. And the unique thing about him was that he was able, for the very first time, and we're speaking about a whole bunch of Kabbalists here, and in between these Kabbalists, there were hundreds in between as well. These are not the only Kabbalists there were. We're just speaking about the pillars, so to speak, the milestones of the wisdom of Kabbalah. Of all the Kabbalists that came before him, Ba'al Salam was the first one who was able to write in such a way that ordinary human being, ordinary person could pick up a book and start a spiritual ascent without all of the previous, all of the studies of the Torah and Talmud and all of the other books that people were required to read before getting to the wisdom of Kabbalah.
Specifically, actually, there's something about for actually the Ari that describes this this phenomena. It's in the Kabbalah for the Student, page 17, from the article Disclosing a Portion, covering 2. He writes, the Ari's predecessors were not given permission from above to disclose the interpretations of the wisdom, and that he was given this permission. And also, this does not distinguish any greatness or smallness at all, since it is possible that the virtue of his formers was much greater than the Ari's, but they were not given permission for it at all. For this reason, they refrained from writing commentaries that relate to the actual wisdom, but settled for brief intimations that were not in any way linked to one another. For this reason, since the books of the Ari appeared in the world, all who study the wisdom of Kabbalah have left their hands from all the books of the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, and all the first and the great ones that preceded the Ari, as it is known among those who engage in the wisdom. They have attached their spiritual lives solely to the writing of the Ari, in a way that the essential books considered proper interpretations of this wisdom are only the Book of Zohar, the Tikkunim, and following them, the books of the Ari. It was a turning point. It was really a turning point, and Ba'al Salam, in a way, actually, if you read, there's there are other references, and they actually point to that time around the 16th century when it is already time for the complete redemption, for all of humanity to start engaging in the wisdom and move towards correction. And Ba'al Salam, as we said, he really helped to kind of move us forward, because he took the writings of the Ari, which already are very scientific, if you will, in comparison to the previous writings.
Just expanded them.
Right. He took that method, which was kind of condensed, and he just opened it up for us. He
wrote it in very basic, simple language, and sometimes not very simple. Sometimes he used a very, for example, sociological language and political language and the language of the science. And he was able to dissect it and discern it to such a degree that people who were not brewing in these writings for all of their lives were able to pick up a book and actually take something from it. Were able to start their path to spirituality.
Which was huge, because up to that point, only a select few would engage in the wisdom, and only for the purpose of expanding on it for that generation and moving it forward until such a time that humanity is ready. Ready, as we know, meaning that desire, which is called the point in the heart, is revealed and is starting to demand a different kind of fulfillment, something higher than all the fulfillments of this world. And Ba'al Salam, and also I wonder, when I heard it the first time, I had a question about what does it mean it was permitted from above? What does it mean to receive permission? And there's a nice quote, Ba'al Salam writes it from page 45 in your book, from the teachings of the wisdom of Kabbalah and its essence. from the section giving permission. And he writes, "I am glad that I've been born in such a generation when it is permitted to disclose the wisdom of truth. And should you ask, how do I know that it is permitted? I will reply that I have been given permission to disclose. Until now, the ways by which it is possible to publicly engage and to fully explain each word have not been revealed to any sage. And we deem it as dependent not on the greatness of the sage, but on the state of the generation."
And this is really huge. It's dependent on the state of the generation, and this speaks to everything that we drew on the board here. Every single sage that has appeared with his monumental work to progress on this path of the wisdom of Kabbalah, to add to the wisdom of Kabbalah, has done it so because the humanity was ready, because the collective egoism, the collective will to receive has become ripe to receive that certain portion of the light.
Beautiful. So basically, we see that as the desire develops, humanity develops with it. So it's not the other way around. It starts with the desire, meaning it's not that the external conditions change, something from the outside happens. Rather, it's the desire that grows, that demands more pleasure for less effort, that as it grows, humanity develops. And as humanity develops and the desire grows, the method develops alongside it. Basically, to always, at every point along the way, to be suitable for that state. I know we don't have a lot of time. Actually, we have very little time left. It's important. We cannot conclude this timeline without two additional key figures.
Very important figures.
So the first is the Rabash.
Rabash is an acronym for Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag.
Halevi.
Ashlag.
Yeah, it's long. You can call him Rabash. It's fine. He wouldn't mind. Actually, I'm sorry, I wrote it in the wrong.
It's okay.
It's okay. Okay.
Is that important?
He is that important. So Rabash.
It's still 20th century.
I'm writing
until the end of the 20th century.
Yeah, Rabash passed away in 1991. Rabash was the successor, the other next Kabbalist in the lineage that continued Baal Sulam. And what Rabash did, and this was really revolutionary, you could say, which really shows the readiness of the generation. He took the writings, which were up until now were really kind of scientific and talking in general about the purpose of creation, the correction, how the system is built, the structure, how things relate to each other, and also kind of Baal Sulam wrote about the necessity to engage in it and just opening it up to people. The Rabash took the actual practical work in a group and opened it up for us. And
so everything that the Kabbalists have been doing in groups, including what the authors of the book of Zohar were doing,
all the way to Adam Rishon.
Yes, exactly. What people have been doing for all of these thousands of years as Kabbalistic groups, he opened up the method, the actual method by which people are able to connect to each other and penetrate into each other's desires. Something that is as zoomed in as possible. We're talking about the pixelated zooming.
Well, yeah, we're talking about really, when you start to get into the writings of the Rabash, I think it's happening in the second semester, right? It's amazing because here's someone who doesn't know you, and he writes about every single process that is going through you as you interact with the world and you relate to it and to the people around you. This is unbelievable. It is really just like opening up a manual that explains how the iPhone works or how
everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You do this and then that and then that and then that, and after such a certain amount of time, you come to this result, and that result will lead you to this specific state, and everything is written in very precise detail to the extent that you're looking at it and you realize that this is my whole life, this is my desire right there before me. This person knew exactly how I would feel after I would do a certain action of love, a certain action of bestowal of kindness toward the other human being.
Or of hate, it doesn't matter.
Or of hate, yes, of course.
I mean, it's the anatomy of your soul, really. I mean,
Absolutely.
to that level.
It's as practical gets, and this is why the Rabash is one of these amazing, incredible pillars, because he has revealed something while Baal Salam is describing to us the from above downward, right? The method from above downward. He speaks about the general structure and how it influences us, and to what an extent it's important to us to rise up. Rabash took a completely opposite approach. He spoke about a very simple, regular person and what that person needs to do in order to, from here, right now, to start the group and move up toward the Creator.
Exactly. Move up, back the 5 worlds, back to Ein Sof. And the last in the lineage, of course, you heard his name, Dr. Michael Lightman, who was the Rabash's disciple, at his side for 12 years. And it's important to understand Dr. Lightman, Rav Lightman, he represents sort of like the last chain in this lineage, because up until that point, up until Dr. Lightman, it was basically the same method of a teacher and a student, a teacher and a student, and our generation really represents the beginning of a whole new way of correction of attainment, which is, we'll talk about it more, but this is really the beginning of something else, something new, the general correction from the select few to now all of us, all of humanity, in a certain order, as we'll see. But this represents a beginning of a completely new era of attainment.
As it was written in the book of Zohar, the generation, the human desire, collective desire, will be ready to embrace the wisdom of Kabbalah in 1995, converted to our calendar, of course, in 1995. And a little bit prior to that, Rav Michael Lightman started gathering students around himself, started to aggressively disseminate as much as possible, giving books away, giving radio lectures, TV appearances, anything and everything that he could do, any connections that he could find.
Starting Bnei Baruch,
and
this whole
Bnei
system
Baruch is the sons of Baruch, to commemorate his teacher Rabash.
And just a nice quote, just apropos everything you just said. The great spiritual questions, which used to be solved only by the great and the excellent, must now be solved on different degrees for the entire nation, to lower exalted and sublime matters from the height of their tower to the depth of the common and ordinary. This requires tremendous and great richness of spirit, along with constant, regular engagement. For only then the mind will expand and the language will be made clearer to the point of expressing the deeper matters in a light and popular style to revive thirsty souls. That was by Rav Kook, another great Kabbalist. So, I don't know when we have to stop. I mean, we're already past the. I know we started a little late, so maybe we have time for a couple of last questions, right?
There are really no questions. We either bored people to death, and Hunga from Las Vegas, United States says, sounds like we're nearing a breakthrough of fulfillment. And Stephanie from Georgia says, wow, what a mindful. And indeed, that's a lot of information, friends, and it's it might seem a little bit dry and probably a little boring. On the other hand, it's very important to understand and know these milestones in the history of the wisdom of Kabbalah. These are the points at which certain breakthroughs were made. On the level of desire, and 2, on the level of the method to cater to that desire. So, as always, as you've learned from the previous class, everything starts from the desire. The desire is the igniter. The desire is the fire starter. The desire sets the tone for everything that happens. And no different here. Every single Kabbalist appeared with their books, with their works, only because the humanity was ready for it. Everything is it's like one big wave that carries everything with it, and this is our desire. To that extent, the development of the desire kind of arranged everything in history to such a degree so that we would come to this point in time when masses of people, millions all over the world, are ready and willing to hear about the method and ready to take upon it and reach adhesion with the Creator.
So just to sum up, just the concepts, if Alex can show the board. So we talked about the beginning around the world of Ein Sof, coming down through the 5 worlds to our world. This is really the timeline of our world. And then going back, the process of going back up to Ein Sof. In this process, we have this kind of descent from above down. We have an evolution of desires. We have a revelation of the point in the heart, which signals the beginning of this ascent back to the state of Ein Sof, infinity in English, really Ein Sof, but now consciously. So we are part of it. All we have to do is really just follow that point in the heart, that desire. This is the same point that every Kabbalist in every generation from the beginning, from Adam HaRishon, they all follow that one desire, which demanded something above this world. Follow that desire, and you will be on the correct path.
And on this very positive and uplifting note from Leo, we have to conclude this lesson. We're very badly late on this. Thank you, friends, so much for your attention. Thank you for your questions. There weren't that many today. Next lecture is going to be much more involving than that. We hope that you took notes, that you took note of everything that was said today to a degree. And
the lessons are in the archive, I know, so you can watch it again and kind of do some research on the names in our library. It's very interesting. There's a lot of interesting information.
Absolutely, and don't forget to connect to your next lesson on Sunday, same time as today. Your lecturers will be Mutlu and Marcos from Israel. That's it for us, from us from New York.
We'll see you next Wednesday.
Today's Wednesday, yes, next Wednesday. Thank you so much.
Time flies.
Bye-bye.